Hello and welcome, it's Dr. Fred Frizzle here today, and today we'll be talking to you a bit about where photosynthesis takes place. Alright, so first of all I'll draw you a chloroplast, which is the name of the organelle where photosynthesis takes place. Inside your chloroplast you have a number of these like compartment type things, which are linked up with other ones. And then you have sort of a fluid filled matrix over here. Fluid filled matrix. This fluid filled matrix, it does have a proper name, and this is known as the stroma. I've got you stroma. S-T-R-O-M-A. Okay, so this is the sort of general structure. Also you have here these little compartments, and they're made up of these membranes. The actual membranes are sort of almost from this inner membrane here, because it's actually got an envelope around the outside of it. This membrane is sort of folded up into these like stacks, and the thin plates, or the membranes, thin plates, are known as lamella. And when you have a lot of them, they're known as lamellae. The singular is lamella, the plural is lamellae. So basically you have these lamellae, which are these thin plates, and you also have these membranes in between the grana here. So this bit here, these links are known as intergranal lamellae. Okay, so you've got the intergranal lamellae that actually link these different stacks together. Now I haven't actually mentioned anything about what these stacks are called yet, so that's what I'm going to do next. So, each one of these little round things here is known as a thylakoid. Obviously you've got a membrane here known as the thylakoid membranes, surprisingly enough, which is also a lamella, because a lamella is just a general term for thin plates, and basically pretty much all the membranes are thin plates. So this is a thylakoid membrane. Stroma here. And the other thing is, what's the other thing? Hang on. I was going to mention to you what these whole structures are called. This is called the grana. Plural, because there's two of them here. Collectively, they are known as grana, and the singular, the individual, is known as a granum. Okay? So basically more than one is a grana, and one on its own is known as a granum. Okay? Right, the next thing that you need to know is about photosystems. Now photosystems are the bits that actually absorb the light from the sun in order for photosynthesis to take place. So I can't really draw it on this diagram. You actually need an electron microscope in order to see these particular photosystems. So first of all we need to know where they are. So if I'll do use sort of a microscope type thing. How come we're going to do this? So if I go okay, so this sort of like, I'm not sure what to describe this shape as really, but this almost triangular type shaped object is known as a photosystem. As you can see, it gets wider towards the top, and this is just to basically increase surface area because it wants to absorb as much light as possible, and this is why there's so many of these thylakoids in the stack to increase the surface area, because obviously if you've got this sort of shape going on here along the side here, that's gonna soak up essentially a lot more light than if you've got just a dead straight one, because this has a far greater area, and the same principle applies to this photosystem. So there's different parts of the photosystem. I've actually drawn that a bit small, but this is basically in the thylakoid membrane. Thylakoid membrane. And the thylakoid membrane, as you should know, is these membranes here. I just discussed them. Thylakoid membranes, which are the membranes that make up your thylakoids, which make up the grana, which singular is granum. Anyway, so photosystems, they have a bit at the bottom, which I've drawn as a square, which is drawn in most books as a square. That's why I've drawn it as a square. It doesn't necessarily mean it's that shape. It's just a representation of what it does look like, in order to simplify it for you. So this is known as the PPRC. Now, I hate these sort of abbreviations. I don't actually know if people usually write PPRC, but basically it's Primary Pigment Reaction Centre. Oh dear, my pen's running out. Not good. Primary Pigment Reaction Centre. Hopefully you can still read that. I apologise if you can't, but basically this bit at the bottom here is known as the Primary Pigment Reaction Centre, and this is primarily the pigment that's involved in actually converting a lot of this light energy into the chemical energy in the form of ATP. And there's two different types of pigment in the Primary Pigment Reaction Centre, and these consist of 680 nanometer light absorbing pigments and 700 nanometer light absorbing pigments. And you're probably thinking, 680 nanometer light absorbing pigment, what on earth do I mean by that? Well, basically, if you think of light's on a spectrum. So we have 400 nanometers, not meter, what am I talking about, and 700 nanometers. Now this lower wavelength light has a higher frequency. I don't want to get into too much of the physics with you, because this is a biology video, but basically this has higher frequency, and this is the end of the spectrum that has like blue light. Now 700 nanometers is the longer or low energy wavelengths known as red light. Okay, so this gives you some idea on the spectrum of where these are. This is near the top end, so this is near the red end of the spectrum. So the Primary Pigment Reaction Centre primarily absorbs red light, as you know, because it's around this sort of wavelength. Okay, so that's your Primary Pigment Reaction Centre, but you also have other pigments that come up the sides here, come up these little sides, and I could draw them as boxes as well, but they're called accessory pigments. I'll write it over here. Accessory pigments. Okay, so we have quite a few accessory pigments, and one of these is known as xanthophyll, and this is yellow. So this basically absorbs the yellow light, and just because things are yellow in colour, it doesn't actually mean that it absorbs yellow light. You need to understand that that they actually absorb like different coloured light. So I've actually just said that the xanthophyll accessory pigment absorbs yellow light. I actually made a mistake there, because it doesn't absorb that. That's just the colour of it. That's why I put yellow in brackets, because I keep on saying xanthophyll, it's actually xanthophyll you're supposed to say. It's like a Z sound at the front. Anyway, so this actually absorbs blue light. Now the reason why I said it absorbs yellow light is because it's yellow in colour. The actual colour of the pigment is yellow, and you might think, well surely it absorbs the same colour light that it appears to us. And this is not the case, because if you think about it, what we see is because light actually bounces off the thing back into our eyes. But supposing it absorbs it, it's not going to bounce back off into our eyes, is it? So it actually absorbs different colours to the colours of the actual object. I know that sounds insane, it sounds ridiculous, but that's what happens, and it's quite a hard concept, I find, to actually get my head round, and I should imagine I'm not the only one there. Anyway, so that's xanthophyll. You also have another one called carotene. Now carotene appears orange, which should be no surprise, and again it sort of helps absorb blue light. Pretty much all these accessory pigments actually help absorb blue light, and the main difference in structure, like between these accessory pigments and the Primary Pigment Reaction Centre pigments, which are different types of these two, by the way, can be called chlorophyll A the actual pigment that's responsible for these two particular wavelengths of light. The accessory pigments can have like chlorophyll B, which is what the pigment that absorbs blue light in it. So what was I saying anyway? So your accessory pigments like actually absorb different wavelengths of light in order to provide the energy and give it to the primary pigment reaction center, which enables photosynthesis to take place. Yeah, I have this bit here called the stroma, so I'll mention a bit more about the stroma now to you. The stroma has, what does it have? It has its own ribosomes, which, as you should know already, that they're used to assemble proteins. I'm sorry, I'm going to have to stop writing because this pen is not working. I'll use a different pen in the following videos, so don't worry too much about that. So anyway, they've got ribosomes in them, which are used to assemble the proteins, and they also have their own like energy, their own sort of, sorry, not energy. They have their own like DNA, but which obviously they can make proteins that are required for photosynthesis. They also have things like oil droplets and starch molecules, and the stroma is this fluid-filled matrix, so it's basically full of fluid. You've come across the word matrix before. You should have done if you've watched my video on the processes involved in respiration, or the individual steps involved in respiration. Matrix being the middle part of the mitochondria, and matrix is it just in between the inter-membrane space in the chloroplast, because this whole thing's chloroplast. So I've actually forgot to label that chloroplast. Right, okay. So this is most of what I actually wanted to talk about in this video. The one last thing though is the structure of these pigments, which are related, which are associated with chlorophyll A. So in the primary pigment reaction center of the photosystem in this phylochord membrane, the structure of chlorophyll A, which has these two different pigments within it, which absorb these two wavelengths of light, which are on the spectra here. The structure of it has a specialist porphyrin group at the top. I'm really gonna have to struggle to draw this because of my pen. Sorry about that. So this bit on the top here is called a porphyrin group. Porphyrin. And this along the bottom is known as a long phytol. Now PHYTOL, you probably can't even read that. That's very scribbly because I'm trying to get the pen to work. Porphyrin group at the top is quite similar in structure actually to your hemoglobin. I haven't done a video on hemoglobin, don't worry about that, I will do that at some point. But anyway, it's similar to that in the sense that it's got a magnesium atom instead of an iron atom though. So if you actually look up the structure of hemoglobin, you'll realise that hemoglobin has 4 iron atoms in its heme groups, which are 4 of the sort of functional groups in the protein of hemoglobin, whereas this one has magnesium ions instead of that. And that's pretty much it, I think. This intermembrane space is where was it? Hang on. It was trying to remember now. 10 to 20 nanometers in length. So this space is 10 to 20 nanometers, which is obviously very small. And there's another fact that I could mention to you. These phylochoids in stacks, there's usually up to 100 of those actually to form your granum. And that's pretty much it. So I hope you've enjoyed this video. I hope it's been helpful, and I'll see you in the next one. Goodbye.